What do spinach, frozen pot pies, cookie dough, ground beef, and peanut butter have in common? They were all identified as sources of foodborne illness outbreaks in recent years. Foodborne illness is no small matter. Government figures show that 1 in 4 Americans suffers from a foodborne illness every year. Of these, over 300,000 people will be admitted to a hospital, and 5,000 people will die from their illness. That's about 13 men, women, and children every day. The costs of foodborne illness are great. Beyond the negative health effects of an outbreak, there are costs brought on by lawsuits, negative media coverage, higher insurance premiums, and decreased employee morale. These costs could potentially put an organization at financial risk. So how do we keep foodborne illnesses from happening? By creating an effective food safety program using hazard analysis and critical control point principles, or HACCP, and by carefully following all safe food handling procedures. Every single person who works with food needs to take responsibility for his or her part in the process, not just because it's in the job description, but because mothers and fathers, grandparents, brothers and sisters, infants and toddlers, friends and neighbors are all counting on you to keep their food safe. Foodborne illness or food poisoning is caused when someone eats or drinks contaminated or improperly handled food or beverages. Outbreaks of foodborne illness can occur when people become ill from eating a contaminated meal together, or when different people buy the same contaminated item from a grocery store or restaurant. Food doesn't have to taste or smell bad when it is unsafe. In fact, the food often looks fresh and tastes fine, so people eat it not knowing it's unsafe. After the food is eaten, it takes a few minutes to a few days for symptoms to appear. 250 different foodborne illnesses have been identified, which means a lot of different symptoms are possible. However, many foodborne illnesses commonly cause nausea, abdominal cramps, and diarrhea. Most foodborne illness is caused by poor or improper food handling procedures. Often, foodborne illnesses are infections caused by bacteria, viruses, or parasites. The most common bacteria that cause illness are Campylobacter, Salmonella, and E. coli. Keep in mind, though, that contaminants can include other things, such as toxins, chemical poisons, pesticides, and even physical objects, such as glass, metal, bone, or rocks. Widespread outbreaks of foodborne illness usually get a great deal of news coverage, but a large majority of the reported cases of foodborne illness are individual cases that are not part of a recognized outbreak. And according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, most cases of foodborne illness are not reported at all because the ill person doesn't see a doctor or the doctor doesn't make a specific diagnosis. When it comes to your workplace, you won't know a food is contaminated until an outbreak is traced back to your facility. For this reason, your facility should have a HACCP food safety plan so you can prevent foodborne illness in the first place. Because of the high costs of a foodborne illness outbreak to your consumer's health and to your organization's livelihood, your facility should have a plan that addresses hazard analysis and critical control point principles, or HACCP. HACCP was created to focus attention on food safety at every step of the journey, from the farm to the consumer's table. The main goal of HACCP is to prevent foodborne illness rather than trying to fix problems after they occur. In your workplace, HACCP involves examining every part of the food handling process, step by step, to figure out the possible biological, chemical, or physical hazards that exist, and the best ways to control them. Every supplier, manufacturer, processor, distributor, food service organization, and retail food store should have its own HACCP plan specific to its product and operations. There are many benefits of having a HACCP program in your workplace, which include complying with food safety regulations, preventing foodborne illness, using resources more effectively, and being able to respond quickly to problems if they occur. In the next few minutes, we'll discuss HACCP in more detail, so you can understand why having and following your facility's HACCP plan is so important. In order to create a successful HACCP plan for your workplace, several things must be in place. First, you must have a commitment from management that food safety is a top priority. Next, certain programs must already be in place to support having a HACCP plan. These programs are known as prerequisite programs. They provide the basic operating conditions that are required for the production of safe food products. Many of these programs are already required by federal, state, and local regulations or guidelines. Some examples of prerequisite programs include the construction and maintenance of facilities according to sanitary design principles, written specifications for all ingredients, products, and packaging materials, the proper storage of raw materials and products, procedures for sanitation and cleaning, requirements for personal hygiene, and pest control programs. All prerequisite programs should be documented and reviewed regularly. In order to have a successful HACCP program, your facility must also have a system in place for educating and training employees. No food safety program can be successful unless personnel are adequately trained on their responsibilities. Before developing a HACCP plan, your workplace should perform 5 preliminary tasks. The first task is to assemble a HACCP team. The team should include people who have specific knowledge and expertise of the product and process, as well as local employees who are involved in day-to-day operations. Task number 2 is to describe the food and its distribution. A general description of the food, ingredients, and processing methods should be completed. The method of distribution should also be described, including information about whether the food is to be distributed frozen, refrigerated, or at ambient temperature. The third task is to describe the intended use and consumers of the food. Examples of intended use include to be eaten raw or lightly cooked, or to be fully cooked before consumed. Some examples of intended consumers are the general public, infants, or the elderly. Task number 4 is developing a flow diagram to show each step in the food handling process at your facility. Don't forget to include the receiving and shipping of food products to and from your workplace. The fifth task is verifying the flow diagram, which should be done by an on-site review of the operation to make sure the flow diagram is accurate and complete. After these 5 tasks have been completed, you can begin applying the 7 principles of HACCP. The 7 principles of HACCP are basically the steps the HACCP team needs to take to create an effective HACCP program. The 7 steps are: conduct a hazard analysis, determine critical control points, establish critical limits, establish monitoring procedures, establish corrective actions, establish verification procedures, and establish record-keeping and documentation procedures. A detailed hazard analysis is a vital part of the HACCP plan. If the hazard analysis is not done correctly and hazards are not all identified, the HACCP plan will not be effective no matter how well employees follow it. There are 2 stages in the hazard analysis. In the first stage, the HACCP team develops a list of potential hazards that are reasonably likely to cause injury or illness if not properly controlled. Hazards can be biological, such as bacteria, viruses, or parasites. Chemical, such as cleaners, sanitizers, or pesticides. Or physical, such as metal filings, bone fragments, bandages, or fingernails. When doing the hazard analysis, the team should consider ingredients and raw materials, the activities performed in each step of the food operation, product storage and distribution, as well as the final preparation and use by the consumer. The second stage of hazard analysis is evaluating each of the hazards that were identified. The goal of this stage is to figure out which potential hazards must be addressed in the HACCP plan. To determine this, each potential hazard is looked at in terms of how severe or serious the results would be if someone were exposed to the hazard and how likely it is for exposure to occur. Let's take the example of an organization that uses raw ground pork in its operations. The HACCP team lists that E. coli O157H7 and Salmonella bacteria are hazards of using raw pork in food operations. Scientific evidence and past experience shows that these bacteria can cause severe health effects, including death among children and the elderly. How likely is this exposure to occur? The team finds that the likelihood of E. coli being in the meat is very low, and that the likelihood of Salmonella being present is moderate. After evaluating this information, the team decides that the hazards must be addressed in their HACCP plan. To complete the hazard analysis, all hazards should be listed along with measures that should be used to control the hazards. For example, the hazard of bacteria in raw ground pork can be controlled by proper cooking. The second HACCP principle is to determine critical control points. Critical control points, or CCPs, are the steps in the food handling process that must be controlled in order to prevent, eliminate, or reduce hazards to an acceptable level. Identifying these CCPs is essential to food safety. Examples of CCPs may include heating, refrigerating, disinfecting surfaces, approving suppliers, hand washing, avoiding bare hand contact with ready-to-eat foods, ensuring sick employees are not handling food, setting room temperature, and sealing of packaging. CCPs identified in your facility must be documented in your HACCP plan. The third principle is to establish critical limits for each critical control point. A critical limit is the maximum or minimum value that must be maintained to control the identified hazard. Critics are based on factors such as temperature, time, humidity, water activity, pH, salt concentration, and preservatives. Critical limits must be based on scientific fact and may be found in regulatory standards and guidelines and information from experts, among other sources. Examples of critical limits could include storing food at or below 41 degrees Fahrenheit and cooking ground pork to a minimum internal temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit for 22 seconds or more. The next step in developing a HACCP plan is to establish monitoring procedures to make sure critical limits are being met. Monitoring should be an organized process where observations or measurements are planned, performed, and then recorded. The goal is to make sure critical control points are under control. Ideally, monitoring should be continuous, but it's not always practical. When deciding how long the time will be between monitoring, the HACCP team should remember that if a critical limit measurement does not meet specifications, then all of the product from the last acceptable measurement must be examined for safety. Monitoring procedures should be easy to follow, and they should clearly note who is in charge of monitoring each critical control point. If you will be monitoring CCPs, you should be trained in proper monitoring techniques. Always keep in mind how important monitoring is to food safety. If a process or product doesn't meet critical limits, you should follow your facility's guidelines for reporting and handling the situation. When performing monitoring procedures, always date and initial the measurements you've recorded. Monitoring equipment should also be routinely tested to make sure it's accurate. Every HACCP plan should establish corrective actions for each critical control point in case critical limits are not met. For instance, if the internal temperature of this cheesecake is found to be below 160 degrees Fahrenheit, then corrective action needs to be taken. In this instance, the corrective action could be cooking the cheesecake longer. Other examples of corrective actions include repairing a refrigerator so that it maintains proper temperatures and rejecting a food product from a supplier that doesn't meet your facility's specifications. When taking corrective actions, follow these 4 steps. First, determine what the problem is and correct it. Second, the safety of the food product must be determined. You or your supervisor will have to figure out whether the product can still be used. If not, it must be destroyed. Third, record all corrective actions that were taken, including the date and time. Lastly, determine a way to prevent this type of incident from happening again. The bottom line when it comes to corrective actions is that you want to prevent hazardous foods from reaching consumers. The next step in creating an effective HACCP plan is to establish verification procedures. The goal of this step is to make sure that the HACCP program is working the way it is supposed to work. First, the whole HACCP plan should be checked before it goes into effect to make sure it is scientifically accurate. The plan should then be updated whenever there are significant changes to the system, such as changes in equipment, processes, or critical limits. The HACCP team should also make sure that monitoring is taking place according to the plan. This practice should include a HACCP team member directly observing monitoring to make sure it is being done correctly. Monitoring equipment should be checked regularly to ensure that it is working properly. The team should also establish procedures that make sure records of monitoring and corrective actions are being kept. Proper record keeping is an important part of the HACCP plan for several reasons. Accurate records allow facilities to recognize trends in the production line, document compliance with food safety regulations, and ultimately, protect the consumers of your product. Accurate records also help trace ingredients or finished products in case a problem occurs. The two types of records the HACCP team needs to address are the overall plan records and day-to-day records. Overall plan records include things like a listing of the HACCP team members, a description of the food, its distribution, intended use, and consumer, the flow diagram that was created, the hazard analysis, including any documents or data used to support decisions made in the hazard analysis, critical limits, monitoring procedures, and corrective actions to be taken. Day-to-day records include things like monitoring records and corrective action logs. By following the 7 HACCP principles, your facility can create an effective plan for maintaining food safety. When you and your coworkers follow the guidelines set in place under this plan, you will ensure the safety of consumers who rely on you to protect them from foodborne illness. In order to help food manufacturers and processors focus on food safety and prevention, the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has created a Reportable Food Registry, or RFR. This electronic registry goes hand in hand with a regulation that requires facilities that manufacture, process, pack, or hold food for consumption in the U.S. to report to the FDA within 24 hours if they believe there is a reasonable probability that a food item will cause severe health problems to a person or an animal. Examples of when a food product may be reportable include bacterial contamination, mislabeling of allergens, or the presence of certain chemicals at high levels. Once a company or organization reports a food item through the registry, it is then required to work with the FDA to determine the cause of the health risk and help prevent any public health problems. The registry applies to all FDA-regulated categories of food and animal feed, except dietary supplements and infant formula, which are subject to other regulations. One major benefit of the registry and the 24-hour deadline to report is that the food product can be tracked down and the public alerted more quickly than when reporting was only voluntary. The registry also helps the FDA track patterns and target inspections. If your facility handles any food products other than dietary supplements or infant formula, remember that you must report an unsafe food item to the registry within 24 hours. Every day, millions of food items move between farms, processors, distributors, food service operations, and retail sellers. Because food products can spend a good deal of time in transport, it's important for every organization that transports food to have a thorough HACCP plan in place. This plan should cover several areas of special concern to transport operations, including avoiding temperature abuse, preventing cross-contamination, and defending food from tampering. Maintaining proper temperatures during loading, unloading, and shipping is critical to food safety. This process is sometimes known as maintaining the cold chain. Keeping temperatures at proper levels is not as easy as it might seem, especially when you consider that mixed loads of frozen, refrigerated, and dry items can require different storage temperatures, and transport vehicles can make many delivery stops. To help avoid temperature abuse, Check the cooling unit often to make sure it's working properly. Use portable bulkheads when available to separate frozen, refrigerated, and dry food items, and make sure they seal tightly. Pre-cool trailers before loading, so the insulation and air can be chilled to the proper temperature. Lastly, avoid turning off refrigeration systems to save fuel, since doing so could result in temperatures falling below safe levels. Cross-contamination during transport is another food safety concern. Always transport food products in appropriate vehicles that are not used to transport non-food items that could make the food products unsafe. Inspect vehicles before loading to make sure there are no food or chemical residues from previous cargo. When loading, make sure raw products are kept separate from finished products. If you pick up returned goods from a site, make sure these damaged or rejected items are also kept apart from other food products, so that you don't accidentally deliver contaminated items. Keeping our nation's food supply safe from terrorist acts is an important matter. You can help protect the food you transport by using locks and seals on vehicles, sealing cases inside the vehicle with tamper-evident materials, never leaving a trailer open or unlocked when you step away from it, inspecting your vehicle and observing your work area for anything out of the ordinary, and finally, reporting anything unusual, no matter how minor, to your supervisor right away. Today you've learned about HACCP and how having a thorough food safety plan benefits consumers as well as your organization. Keep in mind that a HACCP plan is a living document and should be updated to keep up with improvements in science and foodborne illness control, and to reflect any new and stronger disease-producing agents that emerge. Seek out additional HACCP training or support if you need help to ensure that your plan enhances food safety and complies with regulations. Remember that having a plan is not enough, though. Every employee must make a commitment to follow the plan. One decision to bypass safety could cause serious illness or even death. Don't let that happen on your watch. Keep consumers safe from foodborne illness by doing your part every day.